Let's talk about your sits, Dave, here. And you got a couple of, one big name in particular, Ezekiel Elliott, but I want to talk about Darnold Mooney as well. But let's start with Zeke. So while this is not the week to trust him, taking on a Giants defense that's most likely down Leonard Williams and probably not going to have Tony Pollard on his side as well.
I'm not sure if Leonard Williams is going to play or not. At least he was practicing on Wednesday, so we'll see what happens then. I'd warm up to Zeke a little bit if Leonard Williams is definitely out. But I thought it would be a big deal for Zeke if Tony in the second half, he was splitting reps dead even with Corey Clement, and Clement looked better in the run game than Ezekiel Elliott did. So I think the coaches are justified in having Elliott as a part-timer in the offense. More than 65% of the snaps, might have a hard time getting to 15 touches in the game, and he might have a hard time being good for fantasy if he does not score. The Giants have allowed a touchdown to a running back in 4 of their last 6 games, but only 100 total yards, just 2 guys in that span. I don't think Zeke has 100 total yards in him. You better hope he scores if you start him. I feel better about a lot of other running backs this week.
What's the concern with Darnold Mooney taking on a Minnesota team that allows the most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers?
I'm just worried about him getting that same target volume that we saw a few weeks ago, and it was really with Andy Dalton under center when he got that huge volume. If he doesn't have that volume from Justin Fields, then he's looking for 1 or 2 big plays. A little nervous about him having the opportunity to do that, particularly a week after both Damiere Byrd and Jakeem Grant made big plays in this Bears offense. There just might be too big of a spotlight on Mooney right now. And maybe the Vikings will try to take him away first and take their chances with the other members of the Bears passing game.
Yeah, this matchup is so tantalizing. I like Mooney this week. I think you see what they've done their last 5 games. 76 catches, 1,044 yards, and 6 touchdowns allowed to receivers from the Chargers, Packers, 49ers, Lions, and Steelers. It's a good spot to trust Mooney, at least from my perspective. So I would start Darnold Mooney this week. Heath, let's take a look at your sits for Week 15. And I want to ask you in particular about A.J. Dillon because he's been very good for fantasy managers lately. Didn't perform great last week because he didn't score, but you don't like him this week against Baltimore.
No, I don't, just because this matchup is so one-sided. The Ravens arguably the best run defense in the past month, and maybe right now one of the worst pass defenses with the current state of their secondary. I expect Aaron Rodgers will take advantage of that, and I hate the fact that Dillon had no involvement in the passing game last week. Not 1 target, only 7 routes run. I'm not as concerned about the touchdowns and Aaron Jones stealing all of them because Dillon did have some snaps in the red zone, but it's certainly no guarantee that he gets a rushing touchdown. And I think if anybody gets a receiving touchdown out of the backfield, it's likely to be Jones. Dillon is still a flex. He's not someone I'm comfortable with as a starting running back. I would certainly start Ezekiel Elliott over him.
Yeah, the Ravens have allowed the fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs in their last 5 games. No touchdowns allowed over that span. So if Dillon does not score, could have another empty stat line like we saw last week. 15 carries, 71 yards, no involvement in the passing game. I'm with you. If you can get away from A.J. Dillon this week, I would try to do so as well, more so in PPR than non-PPR. For me, I'm going to sit one big-time player in particular. You'll see the whole list on here, but it's time, I think, to sit DK Metcalf. He's really been struggling. Obviously, hasn't scored a touchdown since Week 8. He's been held to 8 PPR points or less in 4 of his past 5 games. He's just not connecting with Russell Wilson right now, and he's got a spotty track record, as you would expect, against the Rams. 2 games with a touchdown, 2 games with fewer than 60 receiving yards in his past 5 meetings against the Rams, and you could probably expect at this point Jalen Ramsey to play, which will just make that defense better and make things tougher on Metcalf. So not a slam dunk sit. Certainly you're starting him in 3 receiver leagues, but I just don't love the setup for him in 2 receiver leagues based on the production since Russell Wilson has come back, even prior to that when Geno Smith was still under center.